It is 7:43 in the morning. Somewhere in this city, a traffic management system is running. Sensors embedded in roads are tracking cars. Pneumatic tubes beneath the streets are waiting to carry garbage automatically to sorting facilities. A fiber optic network, one of the fastest on the planet, pulses with data, ready to serve a population of 300,000. Except almost nobody is here. This is Songdo. It sits about 40 miles southwest of Seoul, on 1,500 acres of land that didn't exist 25 years ago. Engineers literally dredged it out of the Yellow Sea. It cost $40 billion to build. It was designed from scratch to be the most advanced city on Earth. And it is, in many technical respects, exactly that. It just forgot one thing: people. Songdo is not a failure in the way a bridge collapses or a rocket explodes. It is a much quieter, more unsettling kind of failure, the kind that makes you wonder whether we fundamentally misunderstand what a city is. The stakes are not abstract. Right now, at least 50 governments worldwide are building or planning their own smart cities. India has 100 of them under development. Saudi Arabia spent $500 billion on one called NEOM. China has dozens. Every single one of them is looking at Songdo as a blueprint, which means every single one of them is looking at a warning sign and calling it a guide.
To understand Songdo, you have to understand Seoul. Seoul is extraordinary. It is also, depending on your perspective, completely exhausting. Nearly 26 million people live in its greater metropolitan area, roughly half the entire population of South Korea, crammed into one basin surrounded by mountains. The traffic is brutal. The air quality, particularly in spring, ranges from bad to genuinely dangerous. Housing prices have become so severe that the phrase pyorakgoji, which roughly translates to suddenly becoming poor, entered everyday vocabulary to describe people who felt impoverished simply because they couldn't afford to buy in. Korea needed somewhere new to put people, somewhere smarter. The idea for Songdo came in the early 2000s. A private developer called Gale International partnered with the Korean government and a construction giant called POSCO. Their pitch was simple, and it was seductive. Build a city from nothing. No legacy infrastructure to retrofit, no century-old sewer systems to work around, no politically awkward neighborhoods to demolish. Start with a blank page, or in this case, a blank sea, and design the perfect urban environment from the first line. The plan was breathtaking on paper. 40% of the city's total area would be green space. A central park modeled loosely on Manhattan's own would anchor the residential districts. Buildings would be wired together through a unified IT backbone. Every home, every office, every hospital would share data seamlessly. Sensors everywhere. Traffic lights that talk to cars. Street lights that dim when no one is walking beneath them. Garbage that disappears underground and never touches the street.
American technology company Cisco signed on as the technology partner. They invested hundreds of millions of dollars. The concept they brought was called Cisco's Smart Plus Connected Communities. Every apartment would have a telepresence screen on the wall, a kind of permanent Zoom call infrastructure built into the building itself, so you could video call your doctor, attend city council meetings, or just check on your elderly mother in the unit upstairs without leaving your couch. It sounded in 2005 like science fiction. By 2010, buildings were rising out of the sea. The design even won awards. Songdo was cited as one of Time magazine's best inventions. Urban planners from around the world flew in to study it. A TED Talk called it the city of the future. Everyone agreed it was going to work. The only people who weren't sure were the Koreans who were supposed to move there.
Here is the fundamental problem with building a city from scratch. Cities are not designed, not really. They grow, they accumulate. They are the physical residue of 1 million individual decisions made over decades, sometimes centuries. A coffee shop opens because a factory nearby employs 800 people. A school opens because those factory workers have children. A park gets worn into the ground because people cut corners on their way to the school. The corner shop owner knows your name because you've been coming in every Tuesday for 11 years. Cities are relationships, sediment, accident. Songdo was the opposite of all of that. Songdo was a decision.
When you plan a city entirely from the top down, you face a problem that urban economists call the chicken and egg trap. And in Songdo, this trap didn't just appear, it became the entire story. Think of it this way. You build 80,000 apartments, but people won't move to those apartments unless there are jobs nearby. Companies won't move their offices unless there are employees nearby. Employees won't live there unless there are schools, hospitals, restaurants, gyms, and dry cleaners. Those businesses won't open unless there are enough people to serve. And people won't come unless those businesses exist first. It is like trying to start a campfire where every piece of wood insists that the other pieces catch light first.
The planners knew about this. Their solution was logical, even smart. Anchor Songdo with an international business district, use tax incentives to lure global companies, and designate it as a free economic zone, meaning lower corporate taxes, lighter regulations, and fast-track approvals for foreign investment. It worked. Partially. Incompletely. Some multinational corporations moved in. The UN Green Climate Fund set up its headquarters there. Several biotech and pharmaceutical firms established campuses. There is a convention center. There is a branch campus of the State University of New York, of all things, operating as SUNY Korea. But here is what those companies all have in common. They brought workers who commuted. Survey after survey of Songdo workers showed the same pattern. They came to work, they got in their cars at 5 and drove back to Seoul, back to their real city, back to their neighborhoods, their families, their lives. A 2021 Incheon city government report found that only around 36% of Songdo's designed residential capacity had actually been filled after more than a decade of construction. The number has improved since. Today it's somewhere north of 100,000 residents out of a planned 300,000. But the type of residence matters. Songdo's population skews heavily toward young single professionals and couples without children. Families with school-age children moved in, looked around, and quietly moved back out. The reason they gave was consistent, almost verbatim. It doesn't feel like a real place.
Let's be specific about what went wrong, because vague explanations are cheap. The technology problem. Cisco's Smart Plus Connected Communities platform, the telepresence screens, the integrated data network, the seamless communication infrastructure, was genuinely revolutionary for 2005. By the time the apartments were actually built and occupied, around 2012 and 2013, it was already obsolete. Everyone had a smartphone. The assumption that people would pay premium prices for city-managed communication systems collapsed the moment FaceTime launched. Why would you use the building's video call infrastructure to speak to your doctor when you could do it from any park bench? The technology that was supposed to be Songdo's signature selling point became, almost overnight, a quirky, obsolete fixture, like a phone booth inside a room full of people holding cell phones. Cisco quietly wound down its Smart Plus Connected program. The hardware remained. Much of it sat unused. Songdo's Central Park is beautiful, genuinely, photographically beautiful. Manicured walking paths, a sailing pond, performance spaces, clean air off the sea. On weekends, it attracts visitors from all over Incheon. The problem is that visitors are not the same as residents.
Urban designers have a concept called activated space, the idea that public space only functions when it has surrounding density generating constant foot traffic. New York's Central Park works because 8 million people live within walking distance. Songdo's Central Park has at its densest perhaps 40,000 nearby residents, and many of those residents are gone during the day, working in Seoul. A park that is only full on weekends is not a neighborhood park, it is a destination. That distinction sounds minor. It is not. It is the difference between a place feeling alive and feeling like a very pleasant film set. Here is a number that explains Songdo better than almost anything else. Seoul to Songdo by car, approximately 40 minutes, depending on traffic. Seoul to Songdo by subway, opened in 2016 on the Airport Railroad, approximately 32 minutes from Seoul Station. That is close enough to commute. And close enough to commute is, paradoxically, one of the worst things a new city can be. If Songdo were a 3-hour drive from Seoul, it would have had to become self-sufficient. It would have been forced to develop its own ecosystem of services, industries, and culture, because residents would have had no practical alternative. But 40 minutes is just far enough to be inconvenient for daily life, and just close enough to make Seoul's superior amenities feel tantalizingly reachable. Songdo fell into the purgatory between satellite town and independent city, belonging fully to neither category. In 2023, a South Korean journalist embedded in Songdo for 2 weeks and published a piece that circulated widely. The residents she spoke to described the city in strikingly similar terms: clean, safe, quiet, lonely.
One resident, a woman in her 30s who had moved from Mapogu in central Seoul, said that after 6 months she began to miss the noise of Seoul so badly that she would play recordings of street sounds through her apartment speakers, the distant thrum of a city, the ambient proof that other people existed nearby and were living their lives. In Songdo, she said, she could hear the wind. That is not nothing. For some people, wind and clean air and empty streets are precisely what they want. And there is a real population in Songdo, older retirees, young tech workers who genuinely value the space and quiet, for whom the city functions well. Satisfaction surveys are not uniformly negative. Some residents love it. But some residents love it was not what a $40 billion 20-year investment promised to deliver. The economics of Songdo carry their own specific kind of dread. Because the city was built largely with private capital, Gale International and POSCO, not the Korean government, the developers needed to recoup money through property sales and commercial leases. This created a structural incentive to keep building towers and selling units, regardless of whether the social infrastructure to support those units existed. The result was a city that, for years, grew vertically faster than it grew horizontally. More apartments, more offices, but not more schools, hospitals, markets, were the thousand small services that make a neighborhood function. Those came later, slowly, unevenly, and some of them never came at all. The 2008 global financial crisis made everything worse. Gale International's funding dried up. Phases that were supposed to be complete by 2015 slipped to 2020. Some are still unfinished. For several years, large sections of the city were literally under construction indefinitely, which meant that residents who had moved in early were living next to active building sites for years. The futuristic city of the future had scaffolding on 3 sides.
There is a term in urban planning called induced demand. It is most often used to explain why building more highways does not reduce traffic. It simply creates more drivers. The road fills itself. Cities work on a similar principle, but in reverse. They do not fill because you build them. They fill because of everything invisible that a map cannot show. The rumor of opportunity, the proximity of people you know, the particular slant of light in a neighborhood that your grandmother told you about once and that you never forgot. Songdo was built by engineers. It was planned by corporations. It was funded by capital looking for returns. And all of those things individually are fine, remarkable even. The technical execution is genuinely impressive. But none of those forces know how to manufacture the thing that makes people choose a place. The Korean government is still investing in Songdo. It is still officially a work in progress. Population is growing, slowly. New incentives are being announced. Optimists point out that Seoul itself took decades to become Seoul. They are not wrong. Time may yet vindicate Songdo. A city built in 2005 may simply need until 2045 to feel like a city. That is not impossible. But the governments now racing to replicate the Songdo model in India, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Malaysia are not waiting until 2045. They are building right now, with the same assumptions, the same top-down logic, the same belief that a city is fundamentally a technical problem with a technical solution.
They are all watching Songdo. They are calling it a bold first attempt. They are calling it a learning experience. They are talking about what they will do differently. What none of them are asking, the question that sits at the center of all of this, quiet and inconvenient, is whether the problem with Songdo was the execution, or whether the problem with Songdo was the idea. $40 billion, 20 years, the most advanced city ever built. And what they forgot to pack was a soul.